Welcome back today, guys, to round number 2 with Miami Homes for All. Audrey gives us a great insight into the program she helps develop for the youth suffering from homelessness. Her and I also discuss those who choose the van life, and we even go off topic a little bit and go over how superficial Miami can be sometimes. So, let's do it.
Too many days in the darkness without a glimpse of the light. Running tired and broken and scared, but I swear I'll never give up the fight. I see you broken and beat, head pulled down over your eyes. Every part of you wants to surrender, but darling, you were meant to survive.
We typically have 10 people in our YVAC. 8 out of the 10 youth said something similar happened to me or someone I know. And so there are so many cases of this happening. And so, just going back to our earlier point that we just need to be listening to our residents.
Because it's just your customer,
exactly.
Really, at the end of the day.
Exactly, and giving them the tools to understand what are the policies that could work or what are the policies that could happen to address the issue that you're saying. So when it comes to affordable housing, how do we, our residents are saying, how do we make, vouchers easier to access? Okay, so what's the research there? That's what we do at MHFA. What we do is we listen to what our community is saying. We do some research. We share these things. We bring people together and we say, hey, what do you think about these different policies? That one works. That one won't work. This might work. And then
That fast tracks a lot of effort on your part, too, by just having them come in and say, yeah, this is, because that's eventually what you're going to do anyway.
Exactly. With surveys and then we bring them, we partner with them to meet with stakeholders and we say, okay, these are the things that our community are saying could win. Let's make this happen. So we have a lot of fun at MHFA.
That is, I love the point that you had said, too, that you're looking for policies that do good.
Right.
Because there's so many times, especially when you're involving commissioners and people of power that are okay with as long as it looks good or it sounds good, but they're not always so focused on the do good like you guys are. And I love that because it's so functional, because if it doesn't do good, there's no purpose in even doing it. And it reminded me of, have you ever heard of an HDFC property?
Yes.
Up in, there's some in Manhattan. Are there some down here too?
I'm not sure. I'm not really the housing expert. Sabrina Velarde is our housing person. I focus more on the homelessness stuff, but go ahead. Sorry.
Because when I was a realtor in New York City, it stands for Housing Development Fund Corporation. And what it does, it's really meant to provide home ownership to people with not as much income as the general area. So it's income restrictive. And in Manhattan, there's a lot of different neighborhoods that have them, some Upper West Side, some in the Bronx, some in good neighborhoods as well. They were really buildings that were given to the city or sold to the city by the landlords in the 80s and 90s when the neighborhoods were just crime-ridden, almost like down in Miami, down here they're in the same time frame. And the landlords, if they put some money into it, they're not getting anything back because it's just in a dilapidated neighborhood, crime-ridden. So they ended up selling them to the city, and the city revamped them and put an income restriction on them to where you can own it, but you can only make X amount of money.
We do have those here.
You do? Okay. Mm-hmm. In the city, though, in New York, it sounds so good, but when I actually started doing some research on them, it didn't always do good. It wasn't always intended, didn't always make its mark, because it ended up, for one person, they needed to make no more than $75,000 a year, and this is in today's standards. And if it was a 2-person household, it was $150,000 a year. And in the city, to buy a condo, you need to, or it's a co-op, excuse me, not a condo, it's a co-op. You need to put down still, even with those income restrictive housing, you still need to put 20% down. And in New York City, this might probably just a New York City-based rule as well. You also need to show 20% post-closing liquid assets. So basically, to get in one of these units, you need to have 40% at the time of closing to be able to buy one of these. Now, they're also the price is reduced. So basically, if a 1 or 2 bedroom co-op is going for $700,000-800,000 in the Upper West Side, these are probably around $250,000-300,000. But even still, $250,000, 40% is $100,000. So you need to come up with basically $100,000 in cash, which is unachievable if you're making $75,000 a year, $150,000. Except there's 3 demographics that can do that. Number 1, it's the super saver who works, saves, doesn't spend, which in today especially, it's just very, very, very unlikely. You have the retiree, which they probably throughout their lifetime accumulated some wealth and have some savings. Now their income has severely dropped because of maybe a pension and so forth, but they do have some saved up to be able to afford that. Both probably not, these units probably not designed for them. And then the third makes me laugh because it's almost like the exact opposite of the type of person these units were designed for, which is the person who just graduated from college. They get that first, and you probably know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
They get that first job, $60,000, $75,000 a year, and then their parents have money that they can give to them. And then that's like the opposite, like the cringeworthy, no, that's not what this was designed for at first. And there's, obviously a lot of cases where it did work out and everything, but it just, it reminded me of that. And I do love the do-good mentality, which is probably why you guys have success, because you're not looking at what sounds good, what, might fly through social media, right. Some sayings. We just want policies that we know, one, are achievable, and one will actually get things done. We hate writing plans and policies that just sit on shelves. That's not what we're about. And I think to your point, when it comes to housing choice vouchers or frankly, all kinds of vouchers that exist in our community, there are so many limitations, right? It's really exciting to have all these voucher programs here, but when it comes to actually using them, it's so challenging, one, to find a unit to use it for. One of our youth that I've worked with, she, was able to access a voucher, and she's had it for months now, and she still can't find an affordable housing unit for that voucher. Really? That's surprising, because right? Don't they have to take it? Yeah, because I work at a property, maybe just because the company I work for is a good company and they follow the rules and everything. But, that's one thing when somebody does, we don't have, affordable housing units in our building. But if somebody does come with a voucher or anything, like our legal responsibility and our tattooed saying that we say is we do accept all vouchers. Right. And so it's interesting that you say that, but she's been struggling trying to find a unit that she can use that voucher for. And so, to your point about policies that are meant to do good, sometimes it doesn't. And I think that's where we try to address that gap. Like, what do we need to do to, fix that? We have we also have different kinds of policies and programs to connect people to affordable units, but we find that many landlords are not engaging in that program. Or that's a good word, engaging. Yeah, because it and then there's a really interesting program now in the city of Miami to rehab buildings for free. We'll give you money
to rehab your building so it's, up to code, so it's eco-friendly, all these different things. And property managers and landlords are like, meh, nah, I'm good. It's like, we're literally going to give you money to do this. So it's so interesting that, we have these policies that were developed thinking that this could really work, but then, it just kind of stops. So I think a lot of times when in policy work, it's a lot of trial and error to move the needle on things. But I think when it comes to issues like affordable housing that many people don't want to talk about, I think it's important just to try everything that's possible. Whether it's creating an affordable housing trust fund, whether it's thinking about, creating, we have the Greater Miami Housing, the affordable housing framework and the Connect Capital stuff, to kind of go back to, we're just putting things forward. And so I think that's kind of like what we want to see happen.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I'd be curious to know if you guys do have some friendly landlords that you guys have had consistent success with. Are they...
I can tell you that we do have some small landlords or some small developers are part of, and some larger developers are part of our coalition. And they've been really great to work with. I think some things that we need to think about is how do we expand? So here in Florida, we have this program called Link, Florida Link. And so these are apartments that can be utilized by someone fleeing from DV, experienced homelessness, we're a veteran, someone with disability, someone that's coming out of the foster care system. We have these units, but it's unfortunate that some developers are not using this opportunity when, and so, I mean, there's a lot of policies out there that's like...
They're almost like the people not using the vouchers.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so it's kind of like, wait, how can we, and it's an opportunity, you'll get tax breaks, you have all these things, and then, meh. And
Yep.
So it's a very interesting system that we have here, particularly in South Florida, where I think a lot of times we just... Okay, frankly, I think in South Florida we focus so much on how do we increase our profits, and we don't think about the steps in between. I think that's a lot of times the issue that we have here. I think, not to knock landlords or developers, but it's like, that's their business, right? That's the whole point of business is, how do I maximize my profits? I totally get that. But then you can still increase your profits by doing good. You might, in fact, increase your profits tenfold by doing some good.
For sure, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because there's tax breaks, tax shelters.
Correct. And so I think, and I always question why, these things are not talked about enough. If when we think about, social responsibility and all these things, we can do so much more in our community if we do just do a little bit of good, right? Rehabbing your building, to preserve that building for affordable housing. I've heard a developer once say, oh, why don't we just preserve the building? Oh, it's too expensive. We just might as well knock it down and build it new and sell it for market rate. And I'm like, okay. Or you could preserve it for, it might be a little bit more expensive, but then you get to keep that home, and that whole building that are full of elderly could stay there. And then could eventually, you can open it. I mean, there's so many different things to think about, right? And I think in affordable housing, in policy in particular, and in homelessness, if we just reframe these conversations, I think we can go a long way.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. The one thing, too, that kind of scares me as being, in the millennial generation too, I kind of find most of us save things for the absolute last minute, regardless of the severity of whatever it is that you're doing. Because I cannot tell you how many times a day somebody calls and says, say it's a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and then they're looking for apartments. You go over really what they're looking for. Okay, well, when do you need to move? I need to move this weekend. And And it takes me back because I'm like, we can't even show you the unit before this weekend.
Right.
Because we're so backed up, and scheduling. We're usually like 7 to 10 days out, even from getting you in here.
Wow.
Now, if you apply for it sight unseen online, we can get you in earlier because that's basically getting you to skip the line. But it's fair because you applied for it,
Right.
so that's how we can kind of get you in closer or sooner. But I think about that and I'm like, man, this person is really, it's Tuesday and they need to move by the weekend. There's been times, I'm not kidding, it's been Wednesday, Thursday where people have said, I need to move by this weekend. And like their demeanor is kind of calm. Their tone is calm. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, man, you're in some trouble. I mean, I hope you're living at home and your lease isn't expiring, or you have some roommates and you're on a month to month and you're saying you need to move, but you prefer to move this weekend.
I guess my question about that is like, how much of that are like cultural results of, our economy as it stands, right? And so when I think about that, and I think about why do millennials, Gen Zers, and whomever, why do they push things? Why do they wait until the last minute? I think for Gen Z, all they've ever known for their childhoods and lives is, trauma, they had 9/11, they had, early childhood, and then they had, or maybe not early childhood. Maybe.
Well, do they think that like it's like everything else? It could just happen oversight. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
I think, and then you had 2008, the financial crisis, and then you had, like wars, right? And so you're constantly, they're just constantly like, yeah, I'll just put it off. I'll put it off. I don't need to address it right now.
It's just
like
push it aside.
And then, but then, what is the result of that? To your point about, is that really pushing our economy in the direction that it should be? And then when I think about millennials, us, it's kind of weird to think of us as being older now. We were like the cool ones, and then now we're like, like, oh, you're so millennial. I think about like where we are and how many of our generation, to your point, I think we definitely push things to the last minute. I mean, we're probably one of the most poorest generations, in this country. When I think about most of us have.
If you look at like net worth. For
right.
Sure, yeah.
Like when we think about as a whole nation, millennials, many of us are college educated, but living at home with our parents.
Yeah.
I have, most of my friends still live at home with their parents,
I think we're in the same boat with that too, because a lot of my friends still live at home. I lived at home till just a year ago, a year and a half ago. And I would still be living at home, honestly, if I didn't move down to Florida, because you save so much money.
Exactly.
And I love comparing generations, so I love this conversation right now.
I'm so glad.
I love comparing generations because I think too, looking around, always taking in my own experience and going based off of that. I want to get your thoughts on this. Do you think that there's also like the level of drive within millennials and Gen Zs? Do you think that the level of drive since, let's say go back to like the greatest generation, then go to baby boomers, then millennials, then Gen Zers, I feel like that drive has slowly just kind of, it's been a downturn a little bit just because of also adding in a lot of instant hiccups. And by hiccups, I mean, social media, distractions, other services that make things easier, but they're more expensive. So they're also tempting. And then also factoring in the way companies market and what you actually do need to survive is more expensive than obviously it used to be. Baby boomers and the greatest generations didn't need a smartphone to survive. Smartphones are expensive. Everyone finances it at first too, because it's usually $1,000 plus. And then of course you have now smartphone means you have Wi-Fi. That's another bill. So I feel like we're almost in the scenario we're kind of in, because I feel like there's been a slow maybe downturn of that inner drive, but at the same time combine that with those things that have now taken place in our lives that nobody really knew would, that are very expensive. And, you know, I feel like it's become the norm now to where everybody that is trying to, that's maybe not in the van life, they're just really focused trying to make it, and financially speaking, and trying to make things work career-wise and everything, you know, they're usually on that 10 to 12 hour day every day, whether it's side job and work or school with side job or a combination of both.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're able, by doing that, you're able to kind of be in that normal, you know, afford rent, maybe on the onwards to owning a home. But at the same time, I mean, you are exhausted by doing that at the same time too. And just to stay pretty much on that normal, even upward trend keel.
Yeah. I can tell you just based on my experience and based on my friends' experiences. So I myself, I'm working full time. I'm also a full-time grad student. I'm also... Don't
tell me you got a couple kids, too. Cause
I do not have kids.
Oh, geez, I was going to say, I was like, she's a mom, too. I was like, oh, man.
I am married, and I do have pets, and I am trying to buy a house, right?
Yeah.
I am fucking tired every single day. You know, I'm also taking care of my parents to a certain extent. It's exhausting. I am so tired. And so and sometimes I just literally want to say, I don't want to do any of this anymore. Sometimes, Annie, if you're listening to this, I don't mean this, but sometimes I'm just like, I want to quit. I want to, I don't want to work here anymore. I don't want to do school anymore. I don't want to do any of these things. Whereas I don't think generations prior to us had those kinds of pressures. You know, my dad was talking to me. He's like, why are you working at the same time as going to school? And I'm like, because I can't afford to not to. Yeah. I can't take care of you the way that I'm taking care of you if I wasn't working right now. Just to think about, I think you're right in the sense that there's so much pressure right now that, when we think about economics 101, what are we willing to sacrifice? What is the cost benefit analysis? What am I willing to give up to keep?
Yeah.
Am I willing to give up a job that I love that pays pretty good? Or do I want to think about long term and support myself in the future and make sure I get my MBA? Or do I sacrifice my marriage a little bit?
Which I feel like most people end up doing.
And most people end up doing. And so, and I think and I think about my friends, some of my friends are like, I don't know how y'all are married right now. And I'm just like, I don't know either.
You're kind of just like roommates almost to an extent.
I barely ever spend time with my husband. And my friend's the same thing. My friend, she's a librarian. She was doing grad school, working part-time, and that was even hard for her. She couldn't have a social life. I have another,
and we didn't even
talk about social life. I don't even have a social life,
Yeah.
And my friends, my other friend, she is doing her master's in clinical social work. And so she, she's exhausted. She doesn't have a social life. She hasn't gone on a date in years. I'm just like, girl, you need to go on a date. She's like, I don't have time to, that's the thing, and I haven't seen her. I mean, the first time I saw her in like a month was this morning for breakfast at like 8:15.
Yeah, I planned it like 3 months ago.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, that's the thing we need to think about as millennials, that we're constantly, under pressure to perform. And so a lot of us, what are we willing to give up? Is it that home? Is it housing? Or, I've met some millennials that, they're willing to sacrifice their well-being, their education, just so they can afford a really nice apartment.
Yeah, even if it's a rental.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I had a friend who I knew someone that was renting an apartment right here in downtown for like $2,500. It was really expensive. Yeah. And I think they were a teacher and doing something else part-time. I'm like, you cannot be doing this. This is not sustainable. No, but I want to live like this. And I'm like, that's not going to work.
It's like, yeah, it's almost like you want to look like this, not live
exactly.
like this.
And that's the thing about Miami. We're very superficial. I'm sure you'll...
Oh, it's all aesthetics.
Oh, you already knew?
It's all aesthetics.
Yeah.
That's why I was like... I think like fit in with Miami. I've gotten some friends and so forth too while I've been down here. But that was one things I was scared about because I am such a functional person, not an aesthetic person.
Right.
And I was talking with somebody actually the other day, and I was having this conversation, and I had told them, I was like, oh, and look, and I pulled out my wallet, and my credit cards and my money is in a plastic bag. And we were out to eat. Like, it wasn't like we're at the beach. I didn't want it to get wet. Like, that is literally my wallet is a plastic bag. Yeah. And, I was like, yeah, I change it once a week. It's my Louis Vuitton. And, we kind of like joked about it because, the person was, like a good combination of like functional and aesthetics. She had a very good balance.
Yeah.
I'm very functional, not really aesthetic. I'm kind of gravitating a little bit more towards, because it is kind of fun and nice to decorate your own apartment, to have a little fashion sense. That stuff is fun. I'm kind of learning that by being down here in Miami, and being like a foodie, rather than just water and peanut butter sandwich. But I've learned that in Miami, that it's mainly aesthetic.
It's all about what you appeared like. And I think this kind of goes back to the 80s and 90s. What was happening in 80s and 90s? Cocaine. Like a lot of cocaine, Yeah. How do we be extra as possible? How do we look as extravagant as possible?
Yeah.
How do we all like keep up appearances? But it only goes so far, and it's so shallow. And so this, just to kind of go back to our generation and what we're doing. And when it comes to housing, it's like, how do I make sure that I keep up my appearance, that I look good, and sacrifice everything else?
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate, it's interesting because between me and my friends, I think only some of my friends understand why I'm buying a house. And they're like, why are you buying a house? Just rent this place for a while. And I'm like, nah, bro, I'm trying to live. I'm trying to invest. I'm trying to do this,
live and stay.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm trying to like plant my roots. I'm trying to have, eventually we want kids, I want to do these things. And then, it's interesting that it's like, nah, I want to focus on the here and now. And it's like the hustle. And I think to your point earlier, I think social media has hurt us so much, because we focus so much on the aesthetic, and because we're constantly comparing ourselves to others.
Yeah, it's comparing every single day.
I'm constantly, I'm not even that old. I'm not old at all. But I think, I compare myself to others, and I'm like, oh my God, but look at her, she's traveling, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, but hold on, why am I doing that? Who knows what their life is like, And I think, to your point about, social media and smartphones and all of these things helped us out so much. I need Google Maps to travel within Miami-Dade County sometimes.
Yeah.
I think all of us do. That has helped us out so much. But at the same time, it's like we're hurting ourselves as well. And so going back to your initial question about drive and whether or not we have that same drive, I think we do. But I think there's just more pressure. I think we do have a similar drive to Gen X and baby boomers and all of them, but there's an added pressure there. There's an added pressure to look good and feel good, because one, we're trying to impress our parents. I don't know about you, but I always try to impress my parents.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's also the added pressure of trying to succeed and trying to do better, but then it's so much harder to achieve what our families and our parents and generations before us were able to achieve at our age. My parents are always comparing me to them. They're like, you know, like, oh, when I was your age, I already had you, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, but hold on.
21, 22,
exactly.
they had like 2 kids.
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, or like others, you know, I meet like other.
You know what you should say is, would you have rather me at 21 or 22 had kids then? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, no, I always,
like, oh.
My mom is always like, oh, you know, why don't you have kids yet? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, do you think I was ready at 21? Frank, you know, I didn't know any, you know, and she was like, no, I don't think so. And I'm like, there you go.
Yeah, because 21 right now is in reality, like, I would say like 16, 17 from back in the day.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
And then that gap even gets greater too. I mean, I feel like right now, me hitting, whatever I am, like 27, 28, I think, you know, COVID year is probably 27.
Yeah. We don't count 2020.
No. You know, where I'm like, okay, like, let's start looking for a place to buy. Let's start getting our ducks in a row and everything. I feel like that used to be maybe around that 20, 21 age, you know, to a degree where, you know, I mean, you're in your low to mid 20s. That I think is envisioned as still like a kid almost.
Yeah, and we were talking about this earlier with my youth, you know, with our youth. You know, I mentioned like home ownership and buying a house, you know, or renting. And, you know, they're all between the ages of 16 to 24. And they're just like, nah, don't want to talk about this right now. This is not really a priority, which I totally get. I get this may not be a priority. But, you know, that just proves your point that, you know, the older we're getting, you know, home ownership or investing in ourselves or investing in something, that's not seen as a short-term or long-term goal. That's seen as something that's not even, you know, in the cards.
Yeah, and I saw this like ridiculous article by NBC that kind of eventually went viral because of it, and it showed a pie chart. NBC interviewed like this, I think like 28-year-old guy who lives in New York City, and it was like, where does his monthly income go? And
Uber Eats. That's where mine goes. I'm just kidding.
Well, what made me laugh was in there it said he donates $600 to charity a month. And I was like thinking to myself, I was like, there's no one I know that donates to charity except if they that our age, except if they get like pawned in like when you're checking out a CVS. It says, "Do you want to donate like $1?" And they accidentally hit yes, and like fuck, you know.
exactly. But I don't want to help puppies today. No, just kidding.
But then they end up, you know, it's like just whatever. And I was like, that is like such a lie, and I was glad that in the comment section there was mocking of it.
I think there's just a lack of awareness, right?
Yeah.
Of what each generation's going through right now. Like, you know, our generation, frankly, you know, again, as I mentioned earlier, like many of us are just hella poor. Yeah. You know, there's no way. Anyone, I mean, maybe someone is donating $600 a month to charity, which maybe it's in kind. Maybe it's like clothes are worth $600. I don't know.
Maybe.
But there's no way $600 a month. No, you know, I mean, I can't. I mean, I'd like to donate to myself. So just kidding.
Uber Eats tab.
Exactly. I don't want to cook today. Yeah. You know, so I think. It's a lack of awareness of, again, I think what people need to be doing is listening and having conversations with vulnerable populations about what's actually happening and, like, you know, learning, you know, what are we doing with our money and how do we improve as an individual and as an economy? Because, you know, I think with and also, I think a lot of people don't know what to do with their money. A lot of people think that, oh, let me just keep my money in the bank and my money will grow. No, you can do so much more with your money.
You can. I learned that too.
Yeah, and like we don't have these conversations until like we're in our mid-20s, which is insane to me. Yeah. You know?
It is definitely like you almost want to like rewind and be like, why didn't we teach this in like high school or like in college at the minimum? And you hear that a lot come tax time. You know, you see the memes, sure. I'm glad I know the Pythagorean theorem, but, you know, I don't even know how to do my taxes. I've I, for the longest time, have always felt that way.
Yeah.
Up until I really did some reflection on it, and I was thinking to myself, putting myself when I was 18 in high school, doing sports and everything. I put myself back in my shoes in class, and I was like, if I'm in class at that point, I have no income. Being in high school, I have a basketball game later that day after school. I have all my friends around. There is that super, super cute girl about 2 rows ahead, 2 rows behind me, and then 3 rows to my left. This teacher is trying to tell me about how to do taxes. Am I putting that focus in there?
For sure. No, I totally agree with you. I think that's why, when I meet with you, I have a teenage sister, right? And I talk to her sometimes about, this is what you need to be thinking about. She's like, Audrey, come on, Audrey/mom, why are you talking to me about this? Nobody talks about these things. And I'm like, but you can talk about these things. You can do these things. And it's like, no, this isn't a priority for me. I'm trying to figure out what nail polish to use. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me right now?
What?
No, but to your point, I totally get it. I totally get it. Why aren't, I think to your point, I think, but I think to your point though, we can be talking about these things earlier on.
Yeah.
But we just need to make it friendly to them.
Yeah, friendlier and more definitive.
Exactly. Just like sex ed, right? You can't talk about sex ed, to elementary school and middle school kids without them throwing a riot. You talk to them about here, this is what consent is. These are the different things you need to be thinking about. That is age appropriate, right? And so that way they take that seriously and they internalize that, and then they go on. And I think we can do the same thing with housing and finance.
Yeah, I think so, because what works with sex ed too is, okay, guys, November 15th. For a week straight, we're going to talk about sex. And then everybody knows and is prepared for that.
Exactly.
I think it would be the same where, all right, guys, next week or whenever it is, it's going to be boring. It's going to be boring. It's called adult time, though. It's called adult time. You're the people who graduated a couple years before you have been making memes about us. So we've got to smarten this up, and we're actually going to do it now. We're going to teach about taxes. It's going to be boring. You're going to learn something though, but you will come here, prepared, kind of like, sex ed. I mean, it's not as, exciting.
It's not as sexy.
Or crazy.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think that's what we need to be doing. I think, our young people have said that, residents have said that to us. How do we make resources, workshops, all these things available earlier on, and user friendly. Our young people can figure out. If our young people can figure out Zoom
a lot, yeah.
That quickly, they can figure out taxes, and they can figure out housing, they can figure out leases, just as easily. We just have to make it, user friendly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just simpler. And everything, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
With public policy too, it takes so long to make happen, and just to get passed or funds. So,
fun story: the policy that I mentioned earlier, passing the ordinance in the Miami-Dade County for month-to-month renters to be evicted instead of it being 15 days to change it to 30 days. When it happened in Miami Beach, it happened in the 90s. In the city of Miami, it passed in 2017. This policy for Miami-Dade County just passed in 2021. It took so long to have these conversations. And when we first started talking about making this a county-wide ordinance or policy, a policy to make it 30 days for month-to-month renters to leave, we started working on the affordable housing framework in 2017. So it took a couple years for it to happen. Mm-hmm. And so to your point about policy making, it takes years because one, you need to get everyone to agree. You need to get you need to make sure you're doing it right, and you need to make sure it passes. And there were so many hiccups along the way that it took such a long time. And so I totally agree with you that it takes a very long time for policies to happen. So I think that's why I think for me, I really want to focus on the long term, because if it's going to take this long, it might as well do some really good things along the way. And exactly. Exactly. And so, yeah.
Do you guys get involved with, local elections and so too as an organization? If there is just one, I'm assuming you guys would if there's just one candidate that's absolutely for affordable housing and then the other one just absolutely not. Mm-hmm. And then in the middle too, do you guys just kind of wait it out, whoever wins, then you really try to...
Yeah, I mean, we do have conversations during election years. We do have those kinds of conversations, but we are a 501c3. So we can't support one candidate. But what we do is we have conversations with all candidates and say, hey, this is what we're about. Think about us. And then we wait it out.
And then you kind of pass it down.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then we wait it out, and then that's what we did with this past election year. We actually co-hosted candidate forums with Miami Foundation and others.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, to talk about, the issues that residents have been bringing up, and namely affordable housing. And so those are the kind of conversations we had with candidates. We said, hey, let's have these forums. Let's talk about it. Affordable housing being a big issue. And then we wait, we see how it all plays out. And then right when they're elected, so you remember us? So how about that meeting? Let's have this conversation. Let's do this.
You're hoping they'll still pick up the phone.
Exactly. I mean, we're known to be persistent, So if they don't pick up, we'll just email and nonstop. So we're going to have that meeting. We're going to talk. Mm-hmm.
No, it's good. You have to be, I feel like, especially with these issues too. I mean, they just not going away.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this morning. The market, the sales market, rental market is off the roof in Miami right now. So I feel like homelessness is a lot more maybe at risk, just because I feel like people are getting pushed out, especially with gentrification, and the people at the bottom of the totem pole right now financially are at risk if they get pushed out from the people maybe living in the middle class neighborhoods, they're at risk for being homeless. And then I was thinking, well, what's the opposite? What if the market was crashing? I was like, if the housing market was crashing, still a lot of people at risk to be homeless. And I was wondering, in a hot market or in a terrible market, I feel like if it's going directly in one direction or the other, it's bad for
either way.
People. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's been, I don't know if you're familiar with Audrey Aradanas from the Vagabond group. And so what she did was really interesting. She noticed that a lot of her employees were consistently late to work. And, they shared with her, I'm taking 2-3 buses to go from here to here. I can't afford anywhere near this neighborhood. And so she actually repurposed one of the buildings and made it affordable housing for her employees. And so I think...
That's a nice boss.
Right. I was like, you give me I'm just kidding. So these are things that I think that was a really interesting model. And so I think that's another, when the market is, whether or not the market is crashing or it's growing, I think models like that can work.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to, if it were to, obviously this bubble is not going to last for this long, where this trend is, I think a couple years from now it's going to go down, so how do we, what do we need to anticipate for?
I like that you think like that too, because that is how you are good at something, is anticipating.
Right.
And I feel like with government especially, they are not proactive, they're reactive. And
right.
I love that you use that word, anticipate, because
that's how law works.
Yeah.
So I think we need to anticipate the fact that, yes, the market is incredible right now, right? We have people coming all across the country. You came here from Jersey. People are coming here from California, from Texas, from Colorado. I actually met a couple of people that just moved here. And so, we have to think about when this is going to end. Clearly, this may end in a year or two times, right? A year or two from now. So what do we need to anticipate by then? there's clearly right now an influx of jobs. I don't know if you've been looking, but everywhere is hiring right now, but no one is applying.
Working. Yep.
So you couple that with, you have a labor shortage and soon to be a housing, a huge housing supply. So what the heck are we going to do, Miami-Dade? So these are the kinds of conversations I want all of us to be having, and to make sure that we're having that. One, people are applying for these jobs, and then two, that we address the impending, supply. I mean, there's already quite a supply already, but it's just so damn expensive that the tenants and residents are not meeting that.
Yeah. I like that you brought up the labor shortage on top of the open jobs, because it's like it's a rarity when you don't have that, because you would think, boom, like that would work. You have open jobs, you have people that need jobs. Mesh,
but it's not happening.
It's
not,
just,
and I think, why is that happening? I met with some of, I've been, just trolling on social media. It's like, okay, why are people not applying for jobs? I was like, I think I Googled that. I don't know what I was doing. But then people are like, I don't want to apply for this job because it's not paying enough, and it's, it's not going to do it for me. And people are saying that, why work this thing when I can do this instead, and coast, right?
The coast, yeah.
Right. And that's so interesting to me. And then you have this new generation, not new generation, you have this subgroup of people that are just like, you know what, I'm just going to work a temp job and then travel and work this, I've literally met a couple of people around our age.
It's all short-term mentality.
Yes. And it's so interesting to me. And I'm just like, why? I literally met a couple folks that literally just work, a couple of jobs for about 6 months, and then the rest of the year they're just out traveling, which I find so interesting. Like, why do that when, you can, just going back again, it's like, why are people doing these kinds of things?
Yeah. I get it to a point, because I was there myself where, when you graduate from school, you're kind of talked to like this is your dream now. This is your dream. You're now hitting it. But then what has been said doesn't necessarily meet what the actual reality is.
Right.
And, when you graduate, you don't realize that, because you were treated so well, you're junior, senior, graduating, you don't realize that you're going on the absolute bottom of the pit of society, speaking economically and experience-wise. And it's such like a shocker to you at the same time. And then when you go to apply, you're like, oh man, like, not only do I not want to do this, but this specific position, but the pay doesn't meet it. And I feel like you can always buy if there's one of those that works. The pay's really high, but maybe it's not the job you're looking for.
What are you willing to sacrifice?
Yeah. But, or you love the job, but the pay isn't always as good. And I think, it's such a shocker that then people look towards, oh man, how can I still kind of have that feeling that I had a couple of years ago, where they were on top of the world. They were peaking mentally and everything.
I loved college.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I know, me too. And, you hit that truth, and, there's so many different options, where different roads you can go. There's, kind of coasting for a little bit. There's just delaying everything. And I think almost probably 100% of people after they graduate, they don't dissect their finances for probably a year and a half to 2 years at least. They don't go, okay, I'm owing this much. I'm bringing in this much. My credit score is this, to really have that conversation, because I don't think anybody wants to at that point, because it's, what the reality is.
Right.
So it's like, you just don't want to if you don't have to. And it just, you push it back, and then you always eventually you make that choice of, all right, I'm going to kind of accept this, grit down a little bit to a degree, and then try to make this work, or that coast mentality, which can last for I feel like
forever.
Yeah, really. I mean, I feel like that could go on for someone's whole entire life, just going on to the next thing, letting life control you, and taking advantage of the circumstances, and you just kind of accepting it and going in, or you make that hard choice.
I think about that interesting generation with Jack Kerouac, right? Where that whole generation of folks, of creative individuals, just kind of coasted, right? And I think about why they did that, the results of World War II, the incoming of the Cold War. I think about, and I think about our generation, and I see so many, and not just ours, but Gen Z as well, the pressure after graduation, and obviously there's a lot of privileges there, right? You have a college degree. I think about those that do not have a college degree, and why they do the things that they do. And I think for us, when people, I've asked some friends, why they do that. I had one friend, I knew this one girl, she literally just worked for like a year post-graduation, worked, and then she did the van life for like 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
She did the van life for 2 years, and she loved it. And then she was posting recently about how much she misses it, and how she wishes she can just do that again.
Yeah.
And I think there's, to what we were talking about earlier, there's so much pressure, on all of us right now to make enough money, to, support an aging population more than before. Social Security is going to be gone soon, right? We have to take care of our elders. We have this pressure to perform. We have this pressure to, do great. But then there are no systems in place to allow that to happen. Like, to your point, post-graduation, were you making enough money to be able to thrive? Probably not.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone that graduated college and was able to fully live their lives. And so there's just so much pressure there. And so it's like, why go through all of that? So I think I agree with you. I understand the van life. I understand.
Yeah. And it's surprising too. Sometimes people do it that you did not expect to be doing that.
Right? And when I meet people sometimes, I met this girl, we were in college together. We're both high performing, do-gooders, get all A's, do all the things. We were super involved on campus. And next thing you know, she was MIA on social media for a while. And then I think a year or two later.
That's always concerning.
Right.
Yeah.
A year or two later, she's living the van life. And she's been loving it. And she's still doing the van life. And I was like, oh my God, this is insane, and it was totally unexpected for someone like her. Right. And so I think about that, and I think about, again, with the lack of affordable housing, there's less and less housing available. Partly because I think many of us may not be wanting it. Many of us may not be wanting it, or we may not be allowed to have it, due to not being able to afford it, due to systems in place that discriminate against them, due to just not being able to find resources, or just due to I don't give a fuck anymore. Let me just get out of here.
Yeah.
There's so many reasons why I think there's this housing shortage, but at the same time, a big supply.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. And I appreciate you, Audrey, for coming on today and speaking with me. It's been fun, talking about these issues too. Sometimes isn't the most happy, cheerful conversations, but you're so bubbly and you're able to make it kind of.
Try to be. I mean, you didn't see me earlier chug a cup of coffee. So.
yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.
No. Thank you, Audrey, and good luck with everything. Miami Homeless for All. Wish you guys the best of luck. We'd love to touch base too down the road and see how you guys are doing, and hopefully hit that functional zero. But I'm sure that's always a trending fight. So. Thanks for all the great work you guys do. I encourage people to, definitely research them. They're one of the best in Miami at just organizing and implementing very good solutions to the overall problem, which is just a much needed, wonderful thing. So thank you, Audrey.
Thank you. You have a great one.
You too.